Okay, I have to make a funny face so that I can keep certain videos separate. Otherwise, I need to get one of those little clicky things that you say it has the title on it and everything, and you just click it down when they say take one, like on TV. I don't have one of those, so I just make a funny face. Anyway, this is gonna be a talking one. I can just feel it in my bones. You should be part of understanding the culture if you are listening to this, and this is me going over chapter 2 notes. And I'll try not to make it an hour, but I'm not going to guarantee anything. So last Friday, I said that culture was the second most difficult word to define. I need to retract that. It is the most complicated word to define, according to my book. And amazingly enough, it is second to nature, which I think I said on Friday. So it's weird what your brain can remember. I looked it up in the book. It's a book by Andrew Crouch, called Culture Making. I read that this summer. Okay, anyway. Let's go over chapter 2. You guys can't see this, but I am looking out my bedroom window. There's a tree out there. It is losing some of its leaves, but it is a ginormous tree. And the sky is blue, and it is a lovely, sunshiny day with just the right amount of breeze. It is one of those days that if we still had our trampoline, it would be great to go out and lay on the trampoline, because the part where you jump would be black and it would be super warm, and you would still feel the breeze, and trampolines kind of just meld into whoever is on them. So that's where my brain is at. Not about what is culture, but I'll just bring you into my world a little bit. Anyway, let's get on with the chapter 2 notes. And you should have yellow papers. Mine are white. Mrs. Pitts gave them to you because I forgot to give them to you in class. I'm going to do my best to remember to copy those out and hand them out in class, so you don't have to print them out at home. Sometimes I'm pretty sure that'll work well. Other times I will forget. So we'll just go with it as long as we can. Alrighty, so what is culture is the name of chapter 2. And if you look at your notes, if you talk to anybody just off the street in your house and you say, what is culture? A lot of times you will get more of an adjective than a noun. And probably one of the first things that you will hear is that culture is bad. It's just a first interpretation, and with reason. Okay, that if you just look at what is going around and trying to summarize instead of being very specific, people just, it's bad. Okay, why is it bad? Well, one of the reasons is that many worldviews, not Christianity, okay, but all the other worldviews that we talked about last year besides Christianity, they don't have a category for personal sin and guilt. So that means that anything that would be considered sin is an external problem coming from culture. And culture is therefore bad, and culture makes you do bad things. It influences you badly, personally and anybody else, because if you don't have a category for personal sin, like I'm the one who sinned, or if you don't have a category for that, you deny its existence, then there's still the guilt and the fault of sinful things happening, and you have to blame that on someone else or something else. So then all the guilt and the blame goes towards everyone else, including institutions like the church, institutions like even art, businesses, teachers, family, and friends. The government, it's all their fault. So that's one of the first problems. There is not a category for personal sin in a lot of worldviews, but thankfully, in the Christian worldview, there is a category for personal sin. And since we go to the Bible and we get our truth from there, the truth is that culture happens when humans interact with the world. So culture is not bad. It is not evil. Culture is both a noun and a verb. In other words, as a noun, it is something that is. It's person, place, or thing, sometimes a state of being. It is also something that you do. Culture is an activity. Everyone participates in culture, and the Bible gives us the impression that we should engage culture for long-term good. And then there's a question on your notes. So what is long-term good? Well, at the very basics, I gotta find a better way to say that. The very base of long-term good is good for a long time, okay? To bring about good for a long time. Now, I haven't defined what good is, but good is beneficial. We would all agree you could start to parse the word good, and different people would have different definitions. But I think we could all say that good brings benefit. So we're looking at benefits for a long term. Okay, so what does the Bible say? In John 17:15, Jesus is actually praying, and he says, "My prayer is not that you take them out of the world," meaning his family, his believers, and specifically the disciples. "Don't take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one." So this gives us the impression that we should engage culture for long-term good, because obviously there's an evil one, so there is a battle, and if there's evil, there's usually a good side too. And Jesus himself said, or implies through this verse, that if you leave my family, my believers here, there will be benefit over a long time, as opposed to if you just take them away as soon as they become part of the family. Okay? Then Matthew 6:19, Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." So there is a correlation between what is done on earth and how that plays out in heaven. Like there's some evidence of what happens on earth, what you do, was there benefit, and it's known by the time we get to heaven. It's not like a completely clean slate, which we would go, well, yeah, duh, because God knows everything. But if you just look at the verse, it based, since we're here, we need to engage culture. Don't store up yourselves treasure on earth, but store it in heaven. But you're actually doing the work on earth to store up treasure in heaven. So you see, you guys have thought about this a lot. I'm just trying to show the parts where we get that from. What we do here, I'm going to stop trying to explain. I think you get it. Okay. A lot of time, and sorry, we've heard this a lot, but sometimes it helps to stop and think, okay, so what part of this is, what are they trying to say? And I know you guys have heard it, but anyway. Sorry, words might not come easy today. I'll do my best. All right, so let's go on to what your book said about what culture actually is. And the very simplified definition of it is interacting with the world. I know some of you brought out different parts of the definition. I think Abby said it is what makes life worth living, or she might have said it's what we do voluntarily as opposed to involuntarily. I know several of you brought up parts of the definition. I just don't remember exactly who said what, but I was very impressed with that. At the very base, though, and if you should have a quiz, just remember the definition. Culture is interacting with the world, okay? Also under that, it is the way of life for a group of people. So what does that include? Everything humans do voluntarily. And this includes what is ignored. In fact, in your chapter, one of the gray boxes that I marked because it just kind of hit me, it says what we ignore can influence culture just as much as what we attend to or what we do. And that's just really interesting because what we ignore plays a part as well. Life gets complicated. Okay, another aspect of culture is what we make of the world. We make sense of the world by reasoning and by making things. So, reason, creativity, whether it is a shovel or a painting or a song or how you fix a cabinet with something that's not really a cabinet thing, or you make something work better. That's still creativity. It doesn't have to be ballet or an opera. Creativity is sometimes just fixing a thing, making it better for what you need to use it for. So, what we make of the world. Culture is also that which makes life worth living. All those things that we have a desire for, like laying on a trampoline that's warm in the sunshine, having that ability, having the trampoline, having the yard, having the money to pay for the trampoline, having the beautiful day and the lovely breeze, those kind of things. Culture, another aspect of culture is that which gives us a sense of what we should and shouldn't do. So that plays into right and wrong and morality. It makes some things possible and some things impossible. So culture does make some things possible and some things impossible. If you think about history, and we have iPhones now, we carry them in our pocket. But to get to that kind of technology, Adam and Eve had to start without probably even a wheel. And a lot of manual labor that went through centuries before it was even automated. They could not just jump from being with God to an iPhone. And along that way, because the iPhones were at some point impossible, culture was different. And because when we got to the point, and we live at the time when iPhones are possible, there's some part of culture that has been, you could say, lost, but it is now impossible. All right. some other aspects of culture. It comes from spoken language. A better word for this instead of spoken is communicated language, because if you want to be nitpicky, deaf people do not speak, but they do speak with their hands. There is a way, though, that they communicate, because there are meanings to the language that was spoken, then therefore culture is available. So I just don't want to leave people out who maybe can't see or can't hear, because they have a spoken language. Even if you look in the Bible, in the Psalms, it says the heavens declare the glory of God. So the heavens speak, but it is not a language where I can take it and speak back to the heavens. But it's still a spoken language. So I don't know how that plays into it. I just know there's a difference there. Okay. Culture is complex. Culture applies to individuals as well as corporate, like a group of people. Culture includes artifacts, from finger paintings to a sense of style. So artifacts are things that you can actually touch and feel. Institutions, organizations, there's some examples like heroes, trash talk, ideas of masculine and feminine, foods, rules for fighting. All of those are institutions and organizations. It includes practices, traditional activity or an observance where people express the value of something. That's what a practice is. It is an activity or observance where people express the value of something, such as we stand for the national anthem because we value what the flag represents. You stand for a bride coming into the room because I don't know who started that, but we all do it. The pastor usually says, everybody rise. Sometimes at funerals, people will stand out of honor. So there you go. Culture includes beliefs. These are ideas that hold common understanding or conviction. And it includes ethos. Ethos is just moods and styles of certain pockets of a common culture. The easiest way to describe that is there's Iowa nice. And there's a whole bunch of ideas that come about what Iowa nice is. And all of you guys are familiar with that because you live in Iowa. Now, we also have an idea of what New Yorkers are like based on a lot of stereotypes, but also those stereotypes happen because there are moods and styles, ethos of people who live in New York. Whether it's their accent, whether it's how fast-paced their life is, whether it's the fact that they usually don't own cars because they have public transportation. That is something that really affects culture, and you don't think of it until you're in a place where all of a sudden you don't need your own vehicle. You can get anywhere you need to go using public transportation, and it is a different culture. Let's move on. It also includes meta beliefs. Now, reminder, meta beliefs just means big beliefs. So meta beliefs are ideas about creation. That's what they mean by big beliefs, the big beginning beliefs. So culture includes that. So let's take a little trip here. What postures has Christianity taken over the years? How have they approached culture? Now, for the longest time, and I apologize for this, I would read this chapter and I could not help but think, How did they get it so wrong? And that's really immature of me to say, because the people who have lived before me were not idiots. They were learning, and just as I am learning, and God allows us to learn. So I'm trying to see this with new eyes. So try not to think of them as idiots, but also realize that there's a pathway through culture, and it leaves marks that people can study. So this is really kind of interesting. So anyway, let's talk about the postures that Christianity has taken. The first one that is pretty obvious is called Christ against the culture. You can, just in asking somebody, like, what is culture? And they say bad, okay? You can totally see Christ against the culture. Christ is at odds with culture, and the only way to travel the culture path is to withdraw from culture. They don't get along. So they don't get along. So this is what Christ against the culture means. And I'm just going to check my book to make sure there's nothing else that I need to tell you. So your book does say people who have withdrawn from culture have a hard time understanding their neighbors, and it's hard to love a neighbor you don't understand. Okay. It's just because life is hard, you don't know how to apply, and so therefore, why apply? Why even try? This is a really easy stance to take. Anybody who's ever wished to live on an island to get away from it all is feeling that at odds feeling. And often it comes for good reason. It's because life is hard. End of sentence. Life is hard. And so sometimes the first thing that we decide is, well, let's just get away from it. And then life won't be hard, or it'll be easier for me. And you and I both know that doesn't work well. But people still try. So then there is the Christ of culture. This is a view that tends to hail Jesus as the Messiah of a culture. And the way that you kind of navigate through that is that you become like that culture. Now, Jesus is the Messiah. Whose Messiah was he? He was the Messiah of the Jews, okay? Not of the Americans, all right? So a lot of times it is taking what was in the Bible. The Jews were a real people group, and they were waiting for their Messiah. And you kind of feel like the Jews, wandering, sinning, understanding God, sinning, and then, he disciplines you. There's favor with him, and then there's this big sinning. So because the cycle works in all places and times, but sometimes a culture can take that on as though it's not that we're just like the Jews, but we're just like the Jews. And they kind of just take on Jesus is our Messiah, which has some truth to it, but they take on the embodiment of the Jew. Like their mindset is, well, I'm really just a Jew waiting for the Messiah. And, it's all about Jesus returning. So it's slightly off. So it sounds right, but not quite right, and there's a reason for that. The other problem with this is, since you want to appeal to a large group of people, often you kind of make your Messiah fit a certain picture. So this is the Christ of culture. Christ is going to come into culture. He fits it. So sometimes the Christ of culture is more soft and fluffy and wishy-washy, which we know Jesus is not at all like that. Okay, let's move on. Then there's the Christ above culture. You focus on your personal relationship with Christ. That is what is most important. What happens on earth just kind of stays on earth, but you're doing your dead level best to store up treasure in heaven. But that's by focusing on your personal relationship. Now, once again, there's nothing wrong with focusing on your personal relationship, but when it is your only focus and you leave everybody else out, that's when it's a problem. Because remember, Jesus prayed that his Father would not take them out of the world, but that he would protect them while they were in the world. That's Christ above culture. Then number 4, Christ and culture in paradox. Fun word, paradox. That means they're at odds with each other. The main idea there is that culture must be important because God put us here, but it's also broken. Our only hope is the redemptive power of Christ. And one of the best ways for the culture to know Christ is for influential people to get saved. So you spend your money and your time witnessing to them, bringing them to Christ. Now, once again, influential people need to be saved as much as the man off the street. And there are people who are around influential people, but there are just some missing parts to this, okay? And however, hear the truth. Culture must be important because God put us here. And yep, it's broken, okay? And our hope is the redemptive power of Christ. But along the way, it kind of, I don't know if you would say it fizzles out or it just gets directed in a tangent the wrong way. Okay. Lastly, Christ, the transformer of culture. This is the one that is probably the best representation of John 17:15, where Jesus prays, please don't take them out of the world, but protect them from the evil one. And Matthew 6:18, where he says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Here it goes. The idea behind Christ, the transformer of culture, is that the finished work of Christ is available to us here and now, bringing the newness of redemption to every aspect of culture. Love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, okay? And bring the law of love to bear in every aspect of culture. This goes right along with living out your faith. This is the idea behind the book. Not to be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, to be in the world as Jesus prays that we stay, but be protected from the evil one, and to store up treasures in heaven. So this is really the best picture of applying your faith to culture. Christ is the transformer of culture, and it applies to me and to everyone else. So those are the 5 postures, and I know I've said it more than once, but the last one, number 5, is really the best picture. The other 4 were not bad pictures, but they're incomplete pictures. Okay. On page 39 of your book, it says, our goal in examining the key issues of our day from a Christian perspective is not to lock down the right answers, but find ways in which obeying God will enable us to be culture shapers who bring joy and flourishing. And in parentheses, you have to an often hopeless world. That joy and flourishing, that is shalom. And I want you to see some comfort here, not to lock down right answers. Now, that does not mean there's not a right answer. There is, but that's not the goal. Just to have the right answer. Like, oh, I got that right on my test, I passed. It's not that. There's more. By obeying God and I want to say living out our faith, and let's just realize we're all at a different point in our faith. God's word hasn't changed, but we are all, I guess you could say, at a different point in our maturity of faith. Regardless, though, because of who God is, he can take whether you feel like you have little faith or you feel like you have great faith, he can use that because he is that big of a God. And we do want long-term good, which plays out as joy and flourishing or shalom for those around us. Okay, so how do we know that Christianity is meant to be culture shaping? Well, if you just think back, what caused Christianity to rise in significance since the time of Christ? It was not trickery or abusing power where you have a leader that is a dictator, but it is its core doctrines. Doctrines is a fancy word for belief. It is its core doctrines which prompted and sustained attractive, liberating, and effective social relations and organizations, such as the husband of one wife. Children, obey your parents. Work hard is not necessarily in the Bible, but do all to the glory of God. And even, rats, I just forgot the name of the book. There's a book in the Bible that is written to a slave and his owner because the slave ran away. And in that book, it's in the New Testament, and I think Paul wrote it. Paul urges the slave to go back to his master. And then Paul urges the master to treat him kindly. So these were things that were attractive. These were doctrines and beliefs, like even telling the truth, or owe no man anyone. Honor, I think I already said honor your mother and father. Those kind of things were, another word for attractive, they were beautiful in society. They are still beautiful in society today. But that is what caused Christianity to rise. You'll see in the next paragraph, family instead of social status. We have a leader who gave himself as a ransom instead of a conquering master. Christians share a common table in that we are all created equal, but not a common bed. So that means be the husband of one wife, okay? Praying for your enemies, do good to those who do evil towards you, forgiving just as the Father forgave you, and realizing that we are citizens of heaven, not of earth. Okay? So, how do Christians shape culture? Well, this is kind of an obvious thing, but take it seriously. There is value of culture, and the value of it is not who can make money off of it or to slap some simple slogan on it. And God did not isolate his chosen people. He always placed them in somewhere. Yes, they were in the desert for 40 years, but they lived in and amongst the Egyptians and in and amongst the Romans and in and amongst all those peoples of the promised land. Some they were told to conquer and wipe out completely. And last year we talked about what that actually meant. And sometimes it meant conquer, but it didn't mean wipe out completely. And so they were always in a region where there were other people, just like we are today. And so the first part is to take it seriously, and realize that culture is part of my mission. What Jesus says is relevant everywhere we go and to everything. God wants me where I am, and he wants you where you are. So Samuel, God wants you in Colfax. Hannah, God wants you in Urbandale. That's where you are. That goes for the rest of you. Good happens because of Christ. That's also one of those duh statements, but we need to remember every good and perfect gift is from the Father above. It happens because of him. Remember, he's that big. Regardless of my skill or expertise, I ought to imitate him. That's my job, to imitate him in everything. And how do we shape culture? We create new culture. The only way to change culture is to create more of it. Or you can look at it as shaping more of it. I don't know if you want to think of it as a factory where culture is it's just put out constantly, but it really is. The only way to change culture, if it's just being put out all the time consistently, is to make more of it that is shaped in such a way that it brings good, it brings long-term benefit, it brings shalom. Shalom is a word that you will hear a lot during this class because it is such a rich word. And I know that we talked on Friday, or Rowan brought up on Friday, how good is, well, number one, it's an overused word, and we tend to miss the definition of it or even miss the meaning of sometimes what we're saying because of the use of words or overuse of words. So when you're trying to explain something, go for the upper level word. Try and be more definitive. It's not that good does not have a place. It does. But sometimes there is a better word than good. And we all know that. Since we know that, then let's use the better word. Okay, so woohoo! I got through that in 40 minutes. Thanks so much. That's chapter 2. I think I got everything on there. So have a good week.